Welcome back. All right, news of the day video for all you fine people on the internet for your Wednesday, April the 17th. I wanted to say at the start of this too, thanks for the heads up on the SVP sale that was going on. I already have the jerseys. The jerseys are I'm good. But yeah, SVP Sports had a whole bunch of little trinkets, and so my wife and I went through the trinkets, and there's some trinkets I'm going to try to turn into magnets that I've ordered from them, and just some just peripheral stuff, but still, pretty good haul. And when I looked at how much money you saved off the regular price, it does feel pretty good. I did find a Montreal Canadiens All-Star jersey from the year they had the parlay jerseys. That I had to grab because the parlay All-Star jerseys are really nice. So yeah, now we get into news of the day. Starting with Marc-Andre Fleury. There was obviously a question about whether or not he was going to come back, and if he did come back, he wanted to play for Minnesota. Was the feeling mutual? The answer is yes. The Wild have given him an extension worth $2.5 million for the one season. It comes with a full no-move clause, which makes total sense. Just meaning they can't trade him and they can't demote him to the AHL either. But why would you want to do that? And obviously, if next year falls apart for the Wild and Fleury has a chance to go and play for a contender, he likely would. I would think anyways, because it feels like this is probably his last season. Bit of a surprise, though, because it looks like Wallsted's pretty much ready. So now the question becomes, is Gustafsson on his way out of town? So that's where the question comes in for me. And I've seen others asking that question, and we'll see what they do this summer. Marty St. Louis has had his contract extended by Montreal. They picked up the 2-year option on his contract. He is now signed through 2026-2027. He was already signed for the upcoming season, so this just gives him a little more job security and financial security as well, because when coaches get fired, generally they're still paid by the team after they're fired until their contract's up. So yeah, Marty St. Louis in good shape right now, and I think the Montreal Canadiens are too. I think they're going to be in the mix for a playoff spot next season. Should be interesting seeing how the Atlantic shapes up, because we've got both Buffalo and Ottawa as real disappointments this year, and now Montreal looks like they're going to be better. Jack Edwards making news yesterday, and I didn't do a video strictly on this, but he's retiring at the end of the season. All the best to Jack Edwards. And I mean, there are some fans who are, oh, I hate Jack Edwards and who cares, and good, he's gone, good riddance. I can't do that. I can't take somebody who's been in the game as long as Edwards has and not acknowledge, hey, he had a long career. I wish him the best in his retirement. I do wonder if this is because of the speech issues that he's been having. It wouldn't surprise me. But the reality is that time happens for every broadcaster, and I just wish Edwards all the best. If they still haven't figured out what exactly is causing his speech problems, hopefully that gets nailed down soon. There's nothing more frustrating than having a medical issue and having doctors go, I don't know, we did all the tests. I have no idea. You know? Do you know? We have no idea. I don't know. No clue. So it has to be frustrating, and all the best to him with his speech therapy, and just keep at it, Jack. Yeah, and so Boston will have a new announcer next year. I would think the guy that was filling in for Jack Edwards will be the one that's taken over next year. They did have a fill-in for some of the NESN games. Did a pretty good job. All right, so I want to talk about Detroit, because I keep reading about what a failure this organization is and how damning it is that they've missed the playoffs 8 years in a row. I don't see it that way. I don't see it that way at all. So they had 91 points this year. They end up finishing with their highest total since the last time they made the playoffs in 2015-2016 with 93 points. Now, that was a team that was, doing whatever they could at the deadline to make sure their team was good enough to make the playoffs, but they weren't a contender. And it was a gradual drop-off for Detroit, but it feels like we're seeing a gradual build-up for Detroit. So last year they had 80 points. The season before that they had 74. I understand there are people that are frustrated with the length of time that it's taking, but I think there are some that may underestimate that when you have 16 out of 32 teams that make the playoffs, yeah, it's tough to get in. It's really tough to get in, and I'm seeing complaints from fans of teams that have missed the playoffs of this isn't fair and we should be in. I think it's great for the National Hockey League that there are good teams that miss the playoffs. I think it's great. I do, because the playoffs should be seen as an accomplishment, and I'm old enough to remember when making the playoffs wasn't really much of an accomplishment. 16 out of 21 teams made the playoffs, so if your team missed the playoffs, they weren't very good. And so when I see people saying, well, this team isn't even 500, they should be in the playoffs, I think, man, back in the day. But anyways, The 1990-91 Minnesota North Stars come to mind. 66 points, I believe, and they went all the way to the final. Anyways, I think Detroit's on the right track. I still believe in the Yzer plan. I understand that it's going a little slower than people might think, but I mean, they fought back and they got wins. I thought they showed a lot of heart over the last couple of weeks. I thought Gostisbehere looked great. Larkin showed his leadership, and Kane still got it. So we'll see what happens in the offseason, but with the right additions, I think Detroit could be in the mix for a top 3 spot next year in the Atlantic. So we'll see what happens, but I'm not doom and gloom on Detroit. I can't get there because this year was just, it was an odd one, but a 91-point season. Again, they had an 11-point improvement, so if they have an 11-point improvement next year, that's 102 points. So again, improving year over year is important. The Washington Capitals, they kind of break the models for some people because I always heard the goal differential. When I'm talking about who will or won't make the playoffs, there's always the comments of just like a goal differential. That tells you who's going to make the playoffs, which sometimes does, sometimes doesn't. And this year it hasn't because the Washington Capitals with a negative 37 goal differential make the playoffs. And it's just because when they win games, they're close, and when they lose games, they get blown out a lot. The Islanders are also a team that made the playoffs with a minus in goal differential. Very similar reasons. So it will be interesting to see if Washington is able to, pull off a huge upset against the Rangers or what's going to happen there. For the New York Islanders, they're against Carolina. Can they pull off a huge upset there? If not, then we'll look at Washington, the Islanders, and say, outliers, and think about if teams with positive goal differentials, Pittsburgh and Detroit, had made it instead. But it's close in the East. So, talking about Pittsburgh, the Penguins missed the playoffs for the second straight year, and it's the first time that Crosby's missed the playoffs in back-to-back years. I did see posts today about how that's criminal and it shouldn't happen, and the NHL should immediately bring in a play-in round because how dare they not let Pittsburgh make the playoffs. Just as a note, 2020 we had a play-in round, and they couldn't beat Montreal. So it doesn't necessarily mean that a play-in would get Pittsburgh into the playoffs, and that was just bewildering because Pittsburgh had a much better team on paper than Montreal back then. But this is the first time that the Penguins have missed the playoffs in back-to-back years since their drought ended in 2006. So from 2002 through 2006, they had 4 straight seasons that they missed the playoffs. Keep in mind there's 4 years because in 2005 we didn't have a Stanley Cup playoffs. Then, of course, 2007 they make it, and then they're Cup champions not long after. So these Penguins are going through a bit of a different time. It does feel like they need to do some sort of a retool, maybe rebuild, but with Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and others, it's likely that Dubas is going to be focused on trying to get back to the playoffs next season, and we can sort of nod our heads and go, okay, we'll see how it works. We'll see how it works next time. So the East playoff matchups are set. I was asked my wife about this last night, so I'll mention it here in a video. I'm doing the East previews and West previews and getting all 8 of those previews done. I've already started making up the boards for each series because each series gets its own board. Each series gets its own playlist. Timestamps are no longer needed once you get to the playoffs because every game gets its own video. But yeah, the previews are coming soon. The only one that I can 100% preview, because you have to have the 82 games done. For me, you have to have both teams finished 82 games to do it. There's just the one matchup in the East, and I think it's Washington Rangers is the one that I could do a matchup for, or a matchup video for. So at any rate, they'll be starting either today or tomorrow as we get closer and closer to the playoffs. Chris Weidman. So this came out while I was putting this board together. Chris Weidman, defenseman, Montreal Canadiens, who has not played this year due to a back injury. It's rumored that the back injury may have been career-ending as he's announced his retirement today. 291 games in his NHL career, not too shabby. But it is a shame when you see someone's career get shortened by injury. So all the best to Weidman in his retirement. And, of course, for Montreal, they have some young defensemen that have come up, and they have a pretty good, solid depth chart when it comes to the blue line going forward. But yeah, it's too bad about Weidman. So all the best to him in retirement. All the best to you wherever you're watching around the globe, whatever time you're watching around the globe, of course. But thank you guys so much for all your support as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I wanted to mention too, the whole bracket challenge thing the NHL does. We have one that we do here on the channel as well. We have one that we're doing for patrons. We're going to have one that we're doing for everybody. So the general one and then the patron one as well. And I do put my own out there. I'm not eligible to win a prize though, but we're going to have prizes for first, second, and third place. So keep your eye on the community tab for that, because that'll be getting revealed in the next day or so. And yeah, so all the best to you. And hope you're having a wonderful Wednesday. It's nice and sunny and warm here. Hopefully it's like that where you are. Thanks for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.